Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Like Jake said, be gentle on me. Someone pulled out at the last minute, so a group of us went out to dinner last night, and thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. And I started my presentation at 9 o'clock last night, and I worked into the very small hours to try and put together something I hope is really exciting. So I've got a bit of a free license here because I'm filling in. So I've just chosen a topic that I really care about. I decided that I'd put all the business stuff aside and talk about something very, very dear to my heart. There's a little bit of stuff about me. As Jake said, I'm a general manager. I came on board to Assurity, a part of our leadership group, after having my own company. I've been lurking around this agile world for quite some time. For me, it's been a really nice space to be a bit more creative and explorative. I've trained a lot of people, a lot of faces in the audience are familiar for people I've worked with, and I do a thing called evidence-based management as well. So what I wanted to sort of set the context for today is a collision of three worlds. I have a number of worlds I live in, but there's three sort of big ones, and I want to talk about something quite interesting that's happened in the collision of those three worlds, and some of the energy that's come out of that and what it's taught me. So here's the first world I live in. It's my personal world. I live on a lovely big organic farm up north. I'm a country boy at heart. I'm a very much need space kind of person. I grew up in the South Island. My father was a mountaineer. And so I spent a lot of time being dragged around the Southern Alps in massive big open spaces. So I don't think well in sort of small confined spaces. So I need this sort of stuff. And I also believe quite passionately in growing all my own food as much as we can. So, and I also believe in trusting my children, as you can probably tell. And they have some really interesting ideas. Once they said this, they said, "Dad, we don't need ladders anymore. We should get rid of ladders. We've got this instead. We've disrupted ladders." But yeah, so there's my son lifting me up to the tree to pick pears. And he was only 6 at the time, and that was his first time driving a tractor, but I had faith in him, and There's some of the food I grow. There's a whole collection of pumpkins that I grew one year, and that lasted us all winter. The other passion I have is fishing. I love the idea of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, launching the boat in the dark by myself with no assistance, and if I stuff it up, I've only got myself to blame. So that whole self-reliance thing is really important to me. And again, sort of getting out in the headspace. The phone didn't really tell the picture because there's a really beautiful moon, and I'm heading out to Kauai Island on my own. There's no one around, and there's a full moon. It was just one of those sort of magical experiences. It was my wonderful wife and our crazy 3 little boys. So we have a very busy, full-on, blustering, crazy male household going on in our place. Hence why we live on a farm. There's my beautiful daughter Jess, who I had when I was only 21 years old. So I was a really young father, and so 2 rounds of kids, and a really special moment where I was travelling overseas. I was in Amsterdam, and Jess was on her OE, and we got together and hang out for 3 days as father and daughter on the other side of the world, which is really special. And this is some pictures around where I live, up north. It's a very, very beautiful part of the world. So that's one of my worlds. This really cool world that I hang out with, and it's really sort of nourishing and quite mindful. Here's another world I live in. Taken yesterday, this whole work world, agile. It's something I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about trying to help people think differently. I get to hang out with a pretty awesome leadership team where we're really, really passionate about trying to help people grow and develop, and our mission is to try and change New Zealand. We want to help New Zealand really win on a global stage by improving how our companies leverage intellectual property and technology. So we think New Zealand can be much smarter than dairy farming. We think we can be like a really amazing Silicon Valley, and we regularly go away and figure out what the hell we're going to do to make this company better to do that. And so, yeah, get to hang out with some pretty cool guys. I did a stint as the GM of Auckland, trying to really bring some energy and focus to that business. Every year I get to go on a steak tour of New Zealand with Goiko. If any of you know Goiko Adzak, he's a huge contributor to the agile world, and he's obsessed. He pretty much just eats meat. So we do a steak tour of New Zealand every year. And this is some of my Assurity family. We go on this annual conference every year, and This was the last one we went on to somewhere really, really special. So it's sort of like the work world, slightly different world than my home world. And then I have this world as well. I go down and spend time at my kids' school. I'm a big believer that you do not outsource education of your children to the school, that education starts at home, and parents' role is to sort of utilise what the school does and integrate that with how you educate your children. And there's some really neat things in this photo. These kids are really passionate. If you look at how much they're smiling, except for young Samuel on the front here, who was giving us the stare of death. Whoops. All these other, we caught them at a bad moment, but they're really, really happy, and they're learning stuff, and they're developing, and they've got, I like the shot because they've got their hands in clay and they're making stuff, and it's very real for them what they're doing. And as you can see, I'm pretty happy doing it too. So I'm going to talk about what happens when those sort of worlds for me collide together. And as you can see, there's a sort of wave of energy happens when those two worlds collide, and in a kind of unexpected and different way that I didn't really anticipate. What I want to talk about first is the work world. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out, like, if you saw Kyla's talk yesterday about this exponential wave, she said, we are here, and then there's this boom. And our CE, Garth, often talks that a surety's role is to be well and truly ahead of the curve in the road. And it's sort of, if the road's going to curve around like this, we can't go straight, so that we're here, so that when everyone else comes around the corner, we've got a bunch of stuff and we're ready, we know what's coming, and the services we can do to help people embrace that. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about this sort of stuff. And if you look at what Kyla said yesterday about this exponential wave, we're in essence in the middle of a fourth industrial revolution right now. The first one was really strongly about manufacturing, and we got power and light bulbs and the telegraph that was our sort of first rudimentary communication that was beyond like human-based couriers. And that made a bit of a strong impact, and as Kyla said yesterday, it's like doubling from 2 to 4. There's a bit of an impact, but not massive. And then we got to the sort of age of distribution where we got the telephone, which gave much better communication and opened up markets. And we got cars and transport, and it started to go from, say, a 2 to a 4, and it doubled quite significantly. And then from there on, the sort of, we grow and we grow, but then there was this age of information that took that communication stuff just massive. And then finally, we're in this digital age, which ultimately is the age of the customer. Customers now have so much access to information that, if you think about some of your buying habits now, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm somewhere around the world or in Auckland or whatever, and I think I feel hungry, I no longer go, well, I'm going back to that restaurant. I'll sort of look at where I am I in the city, and look at something like TripAdvisor and go, what's highly rated around me? And go and do that. And that's really because it's about the age of the customer now, because we carry computers in our pockets and have loads of information. So we're going through this thing now, this revolution, and a lot of our stuff at work, we're sort of looking, going, well, what are we doing to empower customers to be able to use that stuff? So a lot of our thinking's happening there, and I'm sure you've seen this sort of stuff before. Uber, being the world's largest taxi company, owns no cars, and Airbnb, it owns no real estate. Facebook, the biggest media company, doesn't generate any content. I'm sure you've seen those stats before. And Alibaba. And we're heading into this world where things are changing so rapidly that we have to be able to continually adapt. And this is why, to me, one of the underpinning reasons that Agile has suddenly exploded. We've, as a group of practitioners, there's a lot of talk today about Scrum coming from 1993 and the Agilists through the 90s. This is a long movement. Dave's going to end today talking about Scrum's 21st birthday. We've been talking about this stuff 21 years more and more. But it's only really just exploding now, and it's because of this sudden curve that we actually don't have really any other way to deliver stuff rapidly. It is the default now. And you look at some of the, even conservative people, Bill Gates saying this, that banking is necessary and banks aren't. That's sort of some quite radical change that leaves a lot of people very, very nervous. And then ultimately what Kyla was talking about yesterday, the sort of moment, because of that rate of change is exponentially going so fast, there's a moment that we're approaching, there potentially machines either overtake humans or merge. So it's sort of a bit of context. That's what I see happening in the world. And then if you look at some of the data backing that up, this is a major global CEO survey that came out earlier this year. This lady here, the most conservative of the conservatives, a chairman of KPMG, saying that the corporate playbook's rewritten and business agility is essential. In other words, the ability to turn and move and adapt is now utterly vital. And that 72% of CEOs think the next 3 years will be more critical than the last 50. So we're going through this insane, it's kind of like going through the universe and you go through a magnetic field. Everything's just going and being scrambled. So thinking about that, the way I see it is our world is rapidly being decentralized. When we started, earlier, our model was very much centralized control of things for large-scale production and mass distribution. So we had this idea that it was, we produce it en masse, there's a single place you go to get stuff because it's the most efficient system possible, and that's the way we organise things. And things like government are very much like that. Things like supermarkets, people just go to the supermarket, it's the place they go to get their food, they don't think about really going anywhere else. And those things are great, but they're also incredibly fragile. There's a very interesting report came out a few years ago called 9 Meals from Anarchy that shows our supply chain in our supermarkets is so beautifully refined to be a just-in-time lean system that if that system breaks, we're 9 meals from complete and utter breakdown. So it's because we've got very centralised thinking around it. If you think around a decentralised system, think around how we work in agile teams. It's kind of more team-based, it's resilient. It means if one piece of the system goes down, it pops back up, very much like the internet. If a router falls down, we reroute somewhere else and it survives. It requires lots of connectivity for it to work, whereas a centralised system, not so much, just tell you what to do. But you lose the economies of scale and you lose the sort of ability to standardise everything perfectly. And examples of that, Khan Academy is a distributed system. It's free access to information, agile. Farmers markets compared to supermarkets. Are they all uniform and the same every time? No, they're very different each time. And they connect basically the producer with the customer and they're decentralised. They don't need a supermarket and a supply chain and all of that. It's local. It's produced where it's eaten. So if you then think of the sort of next evolution of that from a decentralised system to a distributed system where basically that ultimately is the internet, where each thing is just a node that is highly, highly connected and ridiculously responsive. It's like that thing out of the Terminator movie that it gets hit and it just morphs and moves around it and redevelops itself. It ultimately can't be controlled. And examples are like nature. We try and get rid of one species and it just adapts. Terrorist cells, we try to shut down one and 3 more just pop up somewhere else. Bitcoin, it's a distributed system. That's how it works. That's its genius. So distributed systems, I think this is further and further where we're going, and these strategies in distributed systems are very, very powerful. So again, this is very, very, very frightening for organisations that have built themselves on that far left-hand side, like banking and big sort of government-type organisations. Very threatening. So then if you looking then casting forward into the world, looking forward. So I run our education business. I spent a lot of time thinking about what is the future and what skills do we need. If we're going through this change of world, what happens? What's going to happen to all these people? And the sort of general feedback or the information is in 5 years, over a third of the skills that we think are kind of normal today, that they're going to be gone. They're going to have changed. And if you look at what's below, these 2 axes here are talking around social skills, so ability to have empathy, connect, understand customers, and then sort of mathematical, analytical skills on the x-axis. And it's quite frightening. They're saying basically everything under the line here is gone because it'll just be automated. And I'm sure you saw it in Kyla's thing yesterday that, between whatever 45 and 85% of jobs, see you later. And if you think this is fantasy, it's actually not. There's so many amazing things happening. I was talking to a client last week in the building sector, and I don't know if you've seen the big developments going on. There's 2 massive ones in Auckland at the moment. One of them is, I think, 580 houses going in Orewa. It's by a Chinese company that's won the bid. They've got a robot that puts the bricks up, not people. And that's going to happen now. It's not something in the future, it's happening now. So then if you think around the impact on that, all these people here lose their jobs. So what happens? Well, it depends what sort of skills they've got. If they're not mathematical and analytical, then they're going to flood over to this side here. And this side here is already kind of poorly paid. So nurses, police, childcare workers, exception of dentists. I guess lawyers and judges aren't. But a lot of that sort of more human side, the caring side, yep, okay, great. You've got the social skills, but you don't have the mathematical skills, which sort of ultimately means that these are the things that are going to be in demand in the future, which is awesome for us in tech, but kind of frightening for a lot of people. And interestingly, it's sort of, I think, the people on that top left are going to have to think quite seriously about that top right, because they can't all just flood into there. Now, interestingly, when you look at and dig further into their studies, emotional intelligence, creativity and complex problem solving are some of the biggest skills now that kids need. And you look at all the think tanks being set up, all the government organisations, you look at all the sort of people that are casting their heads forward trying to think about the future of education. It's not hard skills anymore. We're not going to go and learn programming and stuff like that as much anymore. What the core skills are going to be is those things I just mentioned: collaboration, creativity, and problem solving. Lo and behold, and here it is. And you look at, this is just a change in 5 years. Look at what's leapt to the top. Complex problem solving still there, but critical thinking, creativity, which was number 10 last year, is now coming into number 3. The ability to work with people and to create environments where people want to grow and thrive is number 4. So these are different skills than what our universities teach now, which is why education's going to be disrupted. There's so much changing. So very, very different skills that our kids are going to need coming through into the modern world. So I kind of looked at that and did this. We know shit. Especially when you look at, like most schools, and just participating with the schools, they're looking at this going, good God, how do we honestly and ethically prepare our children for a bright future when the landscape's liquid? What do we do? So there's one world. That's sort of some of the thinking that's going through my head at work. This is my kids' school. It's a fantastic little school. It's called Kuiper Flat School. It's only got about 85 kids. We live in a really rural community, so most of the dads are farmers or tradesmen, real practical men's men, real blokes. It's very, very community centre. Like if you sit back and watch the school, what you watch is a very strong social fabric between the women. When the mums typically come in and drop the kids off, afterwards they'll spend 10 minutes, it's kind of like a daily stand-up. They talk with each other about what's going on. Seriously, it is. It's like an impromptu daily stand-up. They talk with each other about what's happening, and you hear the messages being swapped, like, oh, could you bring Hayley's hockey boots to practice tomorrow night that you borrowed? Oh, actually, I'm not going to be able to make it. Could you pick them up? Yeah, oh, she can do that. And they just reorganise themselves about what's happening in the community daily. It's fantastic. Wonderful little school, and we're really lucky the kids go there, and it's got very forward thinking. It's a technology pilot school. All the classrooms have iPads, they've got TVs, they use computers. It's part of a government program called Technology Pilot. And then along comes this guy, Gary, who is now the principal of the school, and Gary is just the coolest damn guy you can imagine. It turns out he's mates with Lee Thomas, and Lee Thomas is an Agile coach here in Auckland, and so he knows all about Agile. And so I go along, he says, what do you do? And I told him about what I do, and he's going, oh man, I've been dreaming about for years doing this at school. Could you come and help me do this at school? And so I looked at him and thought, yeah, this could be fun. So I went in and started hanging out in school and seeing what they're doing. And the first thing I started with is I taught a program called Computer Science Unplugged. I was a computer science grad. My former professor, Tim Bell, put this program together and has won all sorts of awards on it. And it's literally how to teach computer science with no computers at all. So I've been teaching the kids how to do, how a quicksort algorithm works by getting them out on a netball court with hula hoops and chalk between the hoops and getting them to order themselves as they go through a series of steps from unordered at the beginning, and then they get to the end and it's ordered and they learn how an algorithm works. So it's that sort of stuff. So here's some of the things we've been doing. I taught them how pixels work, just with really basic things, pieces of paper and numbers and black and white. And so that I taught them binary as well, really simple. They were going around introducing themselves to each other as, hi, I'm 100010101, and introducing each other as binary. It's really cool, and they love it. Here's Eden. She's she's doing some code and testing out some of these things on a computer. I didn't do this. She just picked up the computer and started doing this stuff that I taught in the classroom with no computers. She just took it to a computer. And here's my son, Henry. Henry has Asperger's, and he's naturally very, very mathematical. And spontaneously, after doing this, I taught him one lesson in Python, and he hauled this piece of paper out in classroom. All the kids were given some really dumb word find to do. He turned it over and wrote code. And I think it's really interesting if you create an environment for children that what they actually want to do. And you know what? We went home and put this into Python, and it compiles. It's a counter. He said here, import time, variable h equals 100, while true, time.sleep for 2 seconds, and then print the number is, stringify the age, and then decrement the age. So it counts down from 100 to 1. What he got wrong is it doesn't stop at 0. It counts negative for infinity. But it's really interesting how children just embrace this sort of learning so natively and so quickly. So that CS Unplugged inspired me. I went, man, these kids are like unmolded clay and hungry for knowledge. So then after doing CS Unplugged and being outrageously, it was fun and successful, Gary and I sat down one day and he said, Ed, I've been away to this conference on education and I'm looking at all this stuff and the future of education, and we need to do something different. What are the skills that our kids need for the future to be able, and he said, I think what we need to do is teach them to solve very, very complex problems by collaborating in groups and using creativity. And he said, I think we need to teach the kids Agile. I was like, So the conversation went a little bit like this. I'm like, really? I said, on what? How would we use Agile? And of course, my mind is stuck in my day-to-day Agile work. That was my frame of reference. And so I'm trying to sort of explore what his frame of reference is and on what. And he says, yeah, okay, we do have to actually have a project. We can't just teach theory. He said, we kind of need something practical that we could really work on together. And so I said to him, well, what problems have you got? You know, like the guy works obsessively hard. He works Saturdays, he's just a machine. But I worry because he's such a big influence on our school, I don't want him to burn out. So what have you got? And he said, the sandpit. That's our problem. That bugs the shit out of me. It's a mess. It's the first thing when you walk into the school, you see the sandpit and it's messy, but the kids love it. And we need to fix it, but I don't want to change it because they love it. And I don't know what to do. And let's get the kids to own it and fix it. So I said, all right, we're on. Let's do it. So the first thing that we did, I didn't want them to do this. I didn't want them to solve the wrong problem. I wanted to look at what matters about the sandpit. And one of the things I did with the kids is I just picked up a chair, just like this, and I held a chair up. And I said, what do you think about this? What is it? And I said, it's a chair. And I said, right, how many legs has it got? And it had 2. Because it was one of those chairs that has a continuous piece of steel that goes like that, like sort of flat there and then comes up and round. And I said, right, so it's got 2 legs. How do you think, what else do you see about it? And they said, it's small, it's designed for a child. I said, yeah, I'm 120 kilograms. What do you think will happen if I sit on it? And they said, it won't break. I said, is that a coincidence? And they sort of stopped and they really thought. And I said, do you think someone just went, let's build a chair, here's the design, put it in a machine, make it? And they went, no. And I said, so what would they need to think about when they're designing the chair? And off the kids went into sort of creative land. So we started really thinking about design. What is design? How do you make sure that what you design meets your users' needs? How do you test that? Did they have a 120 kilo person sit on a chair at that side and break it? Or what did they do? Did they just hope? So we sort of really thought a bit about that. And I went away and had to think about it, and I decided that in the end, design thinking is what we needed. And I took them through, over the next year, I took them through this process here of design thinking. And so what we've done, the first thing we did is try to build empathy with our customer and understand who is our customer. We then wanted to haul together all the data together that we'd learned into a big visual management corner of the classroom to figure out what have we learned. We then came up with a whole bunch of ideas. This is on Google, just Google design thinking. We then ideated, like what are all the ways that we could solve these problems? And then we're going out making real-world prototypes that we take to those customers and say, does this solve your problem? So I'm going to step you through that for the rest of this presentation. This is sort of the model that we've been using. So I sat there and I thought about, right, what is really empathizing? And I like this definition. It's to understand and share the feelings of another person. How does this make you actually feel? So therefore it implies you do not do this from behind a bloody desk, right? This does not work that way. You don't define feelings from behind a desk. So we decided that we needed to find a way to figure out who are the users and how do we really connect with them here and figure out what do they need from the sandpit. So who are the users and what matters? And so this is what we did. I got the kids together, and the first thing we did is draw a big mind map of what role does our school play in the community? Who is it? Who interacts with it? So we kind of did an impact map. I used some Goico stuff. So the middle layer here is just a picture of our school, and then we went all around the edge here and the next layer around all the users that could possibly be impacted. And the kids did this. I just facilitated it. So we came up with this children, teachers, caretakers, board of directors, parents, businesses. The kids have realised that businesses, why do they come and sponsor our school fair? What's in it for them? They thought about all the different people involved, and this is a closer up of what they came up with. So you can see here they've got the government. What does the government want? It wants a good society. It wants people to grow up being kind and good people. What do companies want? Ultimately, they've got down here they want to sell stuff to people, but they come and sponsor to do that. So they're onto it. They know why people sponsor. Other schools might be competing with us for students. They've got parents. What do they want? It's quite interesting. One of the other kids came up with a thing, what do parents want? And it said they want to drop their kids off so they can go and have a party. It was awesome. It's interesting what goes on at home there. Other children, teachers, and in the end they came up with this thing up the top with a green circle. It's the headquarters of our community. And that's the line they put on the sand. This is the hub, and I drew a hub and spoke down the bottom. This is the hub of our community. So we started with that, and we ended up deciding that we're going to focus on these 5 key groups. These are the people we're going to go and talk to that we think are the most influential. We split the kids into teams of 5, and about 6 kids or so, slightly less. And this is what we did. The first group went out and focused on the principal. And they had to design their own data collection exercise. So the first thing we did is design the data collection exercise and said, right, tell me about the principal. How does he operate? What do you need? And of course I know, but I'm asking them. And they said, oh, he's really busy. So right, well, how do we get his time? And they said, we're going to have to book an appointment in his diary. I said, all right, do you know how to use Google? And they're like, yeah. So they got online, they figured his calendar, they booked a time with him, made an appointment. They organised themselves a list of questions, and they decided that 2 would interview, 2 would capture answers, 1 would record it with an iPad so they could go back to it later, and another one would draw. They'd draw pictures and say, oh, so you mean like this, so that they can fail fast and learn. And what they found out from the principal is that what he wants is he wants the sandpit to be fun, and that it's a really important part of learning and development because kids need to be tactile. He said he wants it tidy and he's sick of having to buy sand. He feels it's a waste of money buying sand because it keeps getting washed away and it's a waste of school's money. But also the school runs on rainwater. A lot of the kids didn't even think about this, even though they come from farms, that we don't just have unlimited water. If we run out of water, we've got to buy truckloads of water and that's not good. It's school funds that are spent on other things. So yeah, he said, I want to conserve water. And his concerns about it is he wanted fairness in the sandpit. And he wanted the behaviour to be right because it's got all different ages at the school and he wanted it to be safe. So the kids came away with all this data they'd collected from that interview, and the end result of that is we created 2 big flip charts of everything that we thought the principal needed. And I just drew this on my iPad. This isn't what they came up with, but there's sort of the easiest way to get it on a page. What the staff also wanted fun. They see the kids having fun in the sandpit. But they came up with something different. They said the seasons make a huge difference. That in summertime, it's really burning hot and the kids get sunburnt easily. But in wintertime, it can get really messy quite quickly and rainy. That imagination and learning are very, very strongly interlinked. That the whole thing should be bigger because it's very, very popular. And that water is actually a key function. And we thought that water was not required. We thought water was terrible in the sandpit. We thought at first we need to make a nice dry sandpit. But the teachers went, no, kids make rivers and tunnels and castles. Haven't you seen them at the beach? We went, shit, of course. And so we learned something really, really, really new that was important. We also learned that toys need to be better because lack of toys cause fights. So there's sort of implications, there's flow-on implications when we explored and dug deeper. I missed the E, better storage, that the toys get left all over the place and they rust. What we learned from the teachers, again, very, very interlinked concepts. We learned that when there's not enough sand, there's not enough sand. So why isn't there enough sand? Because kids throw it. So why do kids throw sand? It's because they don't have enough toys, so they improvise by throwing sand at each other. So we realised that we absolutely need more toys. That was linked to behaviour. And the teachers said, we personally believe that children need to resolve their own differences themselves in a very responsible and positive manner. So we want to leave them to be able to do that on their own, but with a little bit of guidance and observing. So we want them to choose good behaviour. And then the teachers said it needs to be separate wet and dry areas. We absolutely need water, but we should separate them so that if one lot of kids wants to play and they don't want to get wet, they've got a place they can play, and there's a wet place you can play. So again, we learned some more. We also learned that in summertime, what the teachers saw is the sand gets too dry. We're like, oh, we'd never thought of that. And the kids like to mould things with sand. So what they were doing was going to get water to make the sand wetter, to be able to mould the sand. And we'd never even thought about that. And the teacher said it's a real mess right now. It's not good and it stresses us out. The other things they came out with is they said, we really like a kitchen because at the moment it's mainly boys in the sand pit and we don't want stereotype genders, but we think from talking to the girls that they would like more of that because they're going and creating it elsewhere anyway. So the kids, this was the group that my boy was in, and they went out and they decided the best way to get information about the children was just straight out observation. The other two groups also did interviews. These guys just went out with iPads and observed and interviewed and talked to the kids. And this is what they found. They found that, again, yes, water is absolutely essential. Here's the kids, their little boys, my youngest, they're playing outside the sand pit so they can have water with natural water that's fallen because there's no water source available. So after it rained, this is how they're choosing to play. This water tank here is they were walking when there wasn't enough water to go and get a bucket to bring water back. So we went, right, well, that's a problem because that's our drinking water. So we figured that out. And then lastly, underneath that pile of sand is a drain. And so the drain's getting blocked because the sand's washing away and no one's actually thought about that in the original design. So we learned a fair bit from the kids. The other thing we learned is it's absolutely essential to collaboration, the sand pit. Again, that's my youngest in the Vader t-shirt in the back. He's only, at that point, 5, and all these other boys here are in my eldest class. And the way the school operates is all the kids just merge together. It's almost like age agnostic. So it's a very, very important collaborative space. And it was something else this group learned. And rather than do a poster, this group did a presentation, mainly because they've got my boy in there and he's hell keen on technology. And then the last lot, the kids that did parents, they had an absolutely epic fail. They organised all the parents to come in a sort of study group, and they forgot the fact that parents work. Well, a lot of their parents work. And so they organised this thing at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning and no one showed up. So they realised, oh, damn. So they went away and instead put together a survey and they went out and they found out all this stuff. They interviewed their parents and they found out that the parents really want them to be able to learn from the sand pit. A lot of parents don't have one at home and the kids were coming down on the weekends to use it. So it's not just in school hours. They found that the biggest problem was that kids were going home with sand on their clothes if their clothes were wet. When there's sand on their clothes, they put them in the washing machine. When they put them in the washing machine, the sand blocks the washing machine. That was parents' number one gripe, blocked washing machines. One kid, or a couple of kids actually, had relatives who were digger drivers, and the kids just wanted to copy their uncles, and so they were trying to make diggers on their own with all sorts of stuff. It was causing mayhem. And the parents also said that in winter, the fields are unusable because they're so muddy, and that the sand pit is vital because it's a really important alternative. So we collected this vast amount of information, and sorry it's taken me a long time to go through this, but this is what design thinking does. It goes divergent, where we collect all this data and information, and then we start converging it into what's things that we can actually work with. So we put all this information together, and that got us through this sort of empathise phase. And then we got together and said, right, what is the problem? And then we used a corner of the room with big poster charts, and we summarised all of the key problems that the sandpit needed to consider. So we created this thing that we called a learning wall, where the kids can look up when they're working on it and reference the problems and make sure what they're doing solves the problems. We had lots of discussions, we had lots of presentations, we had lots of talking, and each group had to present back to the others, and there was question and answer, and so we figured out, each group represented a user, and we figured out what were the sort of real needs, and by the end of it we got a shared view. We then went into ideation, and we did some big group-based brainstorming. What could we do? And the kids kind of went a little bit radical. They had all sorts of ideas, from ideas of machines controlling the sandpit. They got really, really sciencey and techie. They had some individual ideas. And in the end, I got them together and we did this sort of whiteboard diagram. What I learned with children is it's quite different with adults. Adults, we could say, as a group, go away and design something and come back when you're done. You've got to be a bit more prescriptive with children. They sort of don't deal with abstract quite as well. And one of the teachers had said, what about two L shapes? I thought, right, let's just whack that on a whiteboard and see where we go. And then they came up with the rest of this. So they said things like it needs seats around the edge, a wet side and a dry side. They said things like, if the water's flowing through here, there'll need to be a drain. There'll probably need to be, like they came up with the idea of a platform where you can stand on and brush your clothes afterwards and the sand falls down and is recycled, doesn't block the drain. This side needs to be higher if it's dry and that one lower. That we could have a water source coming through one of the walls here so that you could turn on a tap and it would flow out of the stream. They had the idea of recycling the water, so some sort of pump or something. They came up with the idea of a cover that covers it to keep cats out. They came up with the idea of around the edge here having a roof and recycling rainwater and it going into this tank, a water source here, so that they never have to worry about water. There's a sustainable long-term source of water. So I just drew the L's and they came up with the ideas and so we came up with that. The first time, the first few rounds before I did that, we failed quite badly. We tried to ideate and the ideas were just like rough and wrong and crazy and out there and it didn't work. And so we changed and tried again. So we went from prototype back to ideate. We tried some prototypes and they were rubbish. They just didn't work. So we went back to ideate, we iterated that until we got to that whiteboard diagram. And then ultimately, this is where we've just got to. We've broken through. I decided that the materials they were using for prototyping were crap. They were too hard. It was glue guns and sticks and stuff, and it wasn't pliable, it wasn't forgiving if you made a mistake. So I thought, what's the most forgiving material? Clay. Right? If you stuff it up, you screw it in a ball and just make it again. And so we ended up going with clay, and it was just a breakthrough. And one day, the kids came up with this prototype. And what we did is 5 groups, and rather than each group, or getting them all to work together, each group did an intense bout of work for 20 minutes. Then they finished and washed their hands, and the next group came in and cycled round and built on top of their work. And so this is the first group. They laid the foundations, and they just made the L. It's the only thing that they did. And then this group came along and added to it. So here we've got the drainage. This is to represent drainage, and this is the platform. Someone started making the kitchen bench, and they started making this wall here higher so that it can keep the sand in. This is the dry side. And you see they started making seats. The next round, the kids came along, they made the wall even higher. They put in the water source. Then they realised that to get the roof up, they need something to stick it in. So they've just put these lumps here, and we've now got a roof. So we can start to see what this is like. And then the final result was this, that they then added the cover and they put gutters on the drains because they realised they'd forgotten that. So this is what we ended up with. This is the sort of stage we've got to now. So then what happens next? The next thing that's happening right now this week is all the users that we interviewed originally, the parents, teachers, support staff, other children, are coming in and organised sessions are giving feedback. And we're trying to figure out, does this prototype solve your problem? If we had it like this, would this solve all the things that you came up with us in a very, very low fidelity way? If it doesn't, we'll wet the clay again, screw it up and start again. And very little's been wasted. There's this whole concept in software that we talk about is, I'll know it when I see it. So what we're trying to do is saying exactly that. Now that we give you this, is this what you were thinking of with a sandpit? Is this the ideas that were flowing through your mind? If not, what would we do differently now that you see it practically? So we're starting to converge in here to think about the actual implementation. And again, we're after their ideas that at this stage, kind of like we would in a sprint review, here's our working stuff. What would you do better? Is there things that we should do next? So then what happens next? After this is what I've agreed with the principal. I can't believe I've pulled it off. Once we agree on the prototype, the kids are going to develop a plan. They're going to figure out all the labour they need. They're going to figure out all the materials they need. And the labour will come from volunteers, typically the dads in the community. The skills that they're going to need in order to do this. They're even thinking about if they don't have enough money, could they go out to suppliers of water tanks and tell them that they can provide the water tank with their logo on it, but they want the water tank for free. And the cool thing is the kids are going to write the business case and the kids are going to submit it to the board. They're going to take it out for approval, not the principal. The kids are going to take this forward for funding and the kids are going to run the project. So then we're going to build it. So these are the key things I've learned from doing this. Design thinking is ridiculously natural for children. For them, getting into something tactile, the idea of experimenting, showing something to people and going, what do you think about this, in a really low fidelity way. Think about drawings kids do. They don't take forever. They just draw them and go, here's a picture of you. That really, really works for them. Often, particularly boys try to solve problems. They'll often come out and go, we should do this. But they don't think about actually what are all the needs of the users. So having a process like this just to slow them down and think about, yeah, hold on, you know, does that satisfy the caretaker or does that satisfy the parents? The parents have been ridiculous. They really, really love it. Parents have been coming home going, my child is raving about this thing that you're doing at school. What's going on? And now I get discounts in the local shops I go to that are owned by the parents. And it's crazy. It's cool. It's cool. And recently I have had a bit of a hiatus on this because I've been really, really busy with work. And people are coming in, parents are asking, what's going on with the sandpit project? Like, we haven't heard anything for a while. They're really excited. The other thing that I've learned is learning by doing is really, really vital. If I stood up and went blah, blah, blah theory, design thinking, blah, 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 the kids are just not going to get into it. I learned that adults are really awkward with prototypes. They don't like putting their hands in clay. They don't like mucking around with stuff and getting dirty. They'd rather have a nice Visio diagram and go, oh yes, it's nice, rather than actually get in and get tangible. And kids' minds are phenomenal. This was my breakthrough moment where I got goosebumps. I think I've created a generation of young anarchists because this is what they said. They went, Mr. Dando, we could use this to solve any problem in our school. I said, yes, tell me more. And they said, like, could we build a BMX track? Or could we get like a spa pool? And I said, does it meet the missions and objectives of the school? They went, because you'd have to present it to the board. And they went, oh yeah, okay. And I said, then they went, we could actually use this to solve anything in our community. And I went, yes, you could. I said, who is the community? And they said, we are the community. Yes. So using something like this and understanding the needs, you could actually own your community and deal with the problems right at the root. They went, oh yeah. Then they went, Mr. Dando, they said, we could use this to solve anything in our country. And I said, what like? What's topical? And they were stuck. And I said, what's in the paper now? And they went, homelessness. We could solve homelessness in this country. I said, how? And they said, well, everyone's got a house. Everyone's got a spare room. If we went out and found what the problems were and built empathy and went through this type of process and prototyped, we could take... And then one of them said, but don't we have to ask Mr. Key? And all the other kids went, why? There's my talk. Thank you, guys.